to Affirming Truths. I'm your friend and host, Carla. This show is a safe place to share our struggles, grow in faith, and root our identity in Christ. My hope is that you will leave each episode feeling encouraged in your journey. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey, Affirming Truths. Welcome to this Thursday's bonus episode. We are going to have such a important and I think encouraging conversation. I have as my guest today, Jessa Hillmann, and you might know her as the Lifestyle of the Anxious Mom. And we're going to talk all things mental health and faith and everything in between. Hey, Jessa.
Hi, thank you so much, Carla. I'm glad to be here.
Are you ready for a big conversation?
I am ready.
Brace yourself. I came across Jessa on Instagram, and I love how Instagram has the ability to actually be a positive thing and bring some real great women into my life. And I started following you because you're so open about your struggles with anxiety and panic disorder. You do it with humor a lot of the time. You have like the best memes for mental health, but I know under the laughter there's struggle, right?
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you could maybe start off by just introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your journey with anxiety. When did it start? How did it show up?
Mhm.
All of that.
Okay. Yes, that will take us back many, many years ago. So yes, I'm Jessa. We met on Instagram. My handle is Lifestyle of an Anxious Mom. I started my platform in 2018 officially, I believe. I was on Instagram long before that, but like I officially launched my blog. It wasn't under the same name, but I like had a dream for my platform then. So I've been working on it for about 5 years. The whole reason why I wanted to start a platform is because by 2018, I had already struggled with anxiety and depression for many, many years. Starting in like late elementary school, I pretty clearly remember being anxious to the point of losing sleep at like 11 years old. And it just kind of went from there. Then it became, I grew up taking piano lessons. I took lessons for 9 years. And so with lessons came like the recitals. And for a few years, it didn't bother me. And then, I messed up one time and I couldn't let it go. I fixated on that for years. And it got to the point where I was getting sick like weeks before the recital to the point that I continued taking lessons, but I told my teacher, like, I'm out. I can't do it. It's not worth being sick like 2 weeks before. It's just not enjoyable. So that's like really the time that I became anxious to the point of it affecting my life. In high school, I was chronically missing class because of stomach issues related to my anxiety. My mom always referred to it as my nervous stomach. So we were already seeing, it was never named anxiety, but we were already seeing links between my stomach aches and my nerves, right? Got different diagnoses for different things regarding my stomach. It was not until college that we actually named it and things started making a little bit more sense. So in college, I saw my first counselor. I also saw my first panic attack sitting through sorority recruitment of all places, the worst place to sit and have your first panic attack. Because if you've never had one, it very much mimics what you think a heart attack would feel like. All the signs are there, the sweating, the like arm pain, the chest pain. So I very much thought I was going to just keel over in front of all these women. It was horrible. So the panic attacks kept coming back. I think in 2009, I was in college at that time and started seeing a counselor and putting the pieces together. It was like, I think this might be anxiety. So I struggled with it like for so many years, not even knowing what it was, which is kind of crazy thinking back on it. I sometimes wonder if it would have made a difference. Like if we knew it was anxiety, what would have changed as far as like course of action? I don't know. I try not to dwell on that. Um, but basically from there, the panic attacks I struggled with starting in like 2011. Um, I did start looking into medication at that time as well. Started going on like a daily anxiety medication right before I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, like months before.
Mm.
And then found out I was pregnant with her and got off because I didn't want to be on while I was pregnant. I had my kids back to back. They're 14 months apart. So I was off meds for about 2 years. When the
With
panic attacks,
crazy
like,
with crazy hormones at the same time,
I
right?
know, I know. Oh, so like the postpartum and two, oh, I will try not to go off on this tangent. This could be a whole nother podcast, Carla. The fact that it was not ever explained to me that I would be high risk for postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. I'd been medicated, I'd been like documented with anxiety for years, and I was not like cautioned or anything. So I'll just leave that there. I could keep going, but I was taken by surprise when my panic attacks like went through the roof after my son was born, to the point that I just stopped leaving the house. Like I could not leave the house without having a panic attack. My husband was working night shift, so it was me and the kids alone most of the time. That was the source of a lot of panic. That was like a main trigger, was being out by myself with the kids, and just being outnumbered, right? Like I have two babies, I have two under two. So like, how do I get out quickly with two kids? Um, and so basically, it's just kind of been things evened out after a while. I did go back on medication once the panic attacks came back. Um, and so basically, I've been on medication since then. So it's been like a 10-year journey
Yeah.
of being on meds and then, going off for pregnancy and then trying to go off thinking that I was better equipped. And so here I am now, like with all of that under my belt, trying to figure out if the things I'm feeling now are a normal part of the adjustment period, or if it's like red flags that are saying, hey, no, like the meds are what's best for you. That's, it's hard. I don't
It's
have
so hard.
the answer to that right now.
I see so much of myself in your own story too. I was, I think 11 when I was having like these chest pains, and they hooked me up. I had to wear a heart monitor for 3 days and record
Oh,
my
wow.
heart. And they're like, "Oh no, it must just be in her head." And we didn't really talk about it back then when I was a kid. We never explored it. No one ever treated me for
Mm-hmm.
anything. I had a suicide attempt when I was 13, and
Mm-hmm.
there was no conversation about it. There was
Yeah.
nothing. So, I think when you say, "Would there be different course of action?" I think
Mm-hmm.
now as moms, we would take different course of action with our own kids. Like, I
Right.
know my experience, I am well more attuned. My son does have an anxiety disorder, he has OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Okay.
we are on it much more, especially because
That's
I
great.
was just left to like flounder. And two, with the postpartum, I had a huge, I didn't even know that, like, I knew a little bit about postpartum depression, but I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
you could get prenatal. I got prenatal anxiety, and anxiety is
Mm-hmm.
not my Achilles heel. Mine is
Yeah.
comes more in depression because of
Mm-hmm.
my bipolar and borderline. But I
Mm-hmm.
got this prenatal anxiety. I couldn't work. I couldn't do my job. I had to go on medical leave, and that
Mm-hmm.
blindsided me. Like, there's not a lot of information given to women
No.
around
Mm-mm.
that. It's crazy.
It
I
is.
know I know it took a long time for me to navigate my illness, to come to
Mm-hmm.
acceptance, to come to a place where I feel like I thrive within the boundaries of illness. Do you
Hmm.
feel like you've discovered that in your life where, or are you still on that journey? Do you feel like you've come to a place where there's thriving, or
Hmm.
are you still looking for that? And just so you know, she's watching me drink out of a wine glass. It's actually kombucha I'm drinking.
Look, no judgment. I wasn't going to say anything. So
It's kombucha.
no judgments.
It is
Um,
Friday night while we're recording this, but
it is.
it's
It is.
kombucha.
You know, it's funny because if you had asked me this pre going off my meds, my answer would be different. So that's interesting to me because I do feel like I'm still processing that. I do feel like at some point in my life, when I started my platform, I felt like I had accepted it. Like, I'm gonna embrace it. I'm gonna use this to be like a relatable experience for so many women. Like, so many women struggle with not even just anxiety disorders. Like, almost all of us have struggled with bouts of anxiety, but a surprising number of women do struggle with anxiety disorders, especially postpartum or being pregnant triggered it, or whatever. So when I started, I was feeling generally encouraged to be talking about it, and I don't mean embracing it like, flaunting it. Sometimes we get criticisms for talking about our mental health online because it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, there's still a stigma there. But with the struggles that I'm currently having, there's a lot of rejection. Like, I don't want to accept. I'll be very honest. This will be my breakthrough conversation about
Yes.
my experience off meds, because I haven't talked about it because I didn't want to be discouraging to my audience. But a large part of what I have been feeling is discouragement. And again, I don't want it to be a deterrent when people hear that and say, oh my gosh, my experience is going to be the same. I can never get off meds, because that's not true. My experience is not going to be yours, and vice versa. But a lot of the like darkness that I have been feeling is just defeat. It's like, I should have known better than to try to get off the meds. Like, this is just how I'm always going to be, and there's no making it better. And so it's like all that self-doubt is coming back. That's like, I don't want to accept that this is going to be a part of my life forever. So that's hard because it's not, this is, I can't speak for you, but this is not the life that I would have chosen for
Yeah.
myself. So that comes back during times like this when there's just so much struggle. Is you're like, this is not where I thought it would be. This is not what I thought it would be like. It's
So let
just
me ask you this. Let me ask you this. If you had gotten to a place where you were living your life with relative success
mhm.
in terms of managing your anxiety, what was the pull to get off the medication that was working?
That's a good question, because I do feel like I did have relative success, right? I was still having panic attacks on the meds.
Okay.
So part of the reasoning was, if I'm
It's
still having panic attacks on the meds,
it
what are
must
they
not
doing?
be working. Yeah. Because
what are
not
what am
every
I doing?
medication works. Not every like there
Right.
medication, there's a lot of trial and error. There's some people that
Mm-hmm.
never find the right mix. Like it's not just as
I know.
simple as a here's your blood test, here's the medication that matches you. It's not that at all.
Yes. Well, and my doctors didn't even go that far. They're just like, we're just going to prescribe you something and we're going to see how it goes. There was no sort of like, we're going to make an educated guess by drawing blood. It was just like, well, this is a popular one, so let's go ahead and try that.
Yeah.
So I've been on two or three, two different daily medications, and then I've used a couple of like the instant, relief medications. The whole system is flawed. We have military insurance. I'm waiting on an appointment at the end of this month to talk to my doctor again. I've been waiting for over a month. This is the same sort of wait time when your refills lapse and you're waiting for a new one. So in the course of the 10 years that I've been on meds, I've experienced withdrawal involuntarily numerous times, waiting on med
Really?
refill. Yep, waiting on med refills. Things have gotten screwed up. And so that was a big push too, is to just not have to even deal with that system. Because I
Yeah.
am using other products that I had hoped would help a little bit more. They are helping.
Yeah.
I am still using those and it does help some. But, you know, too, I wanted to see how my body would do naturally, not
Yes.
producing serotonin on its own. It's
Yes.
doing about how you would expect it to do.
Yeah.
We're struggling.
Yeah.
Um, so, so that was kind of the push to, I am still using all of my coping, you know, mechanisms. It's up and down. Today I actually had nothing in my system. I had no gummies, I had no medication, obviously. And I did relatively well. I probably should have celebrated that a little bit more.
Yes, you
But
should.
I didn't have a panic attack. I was only mildly anxious. And we're talking sitting at my desk, like behind a computer. I struggle a lot, even in that environment. But I was like everything free today. So I did pretty well considering. Um, but it's frustrating to be part of that system. That was a big push to like go ahead and get off and just get
I-
away from
Is that because of
all.
the military, or is that the way it works in the US?
Girl,
I'm Canadian, so
I know. I think that is just the way that it is in the US. I mean, of course, there's going to be places that that's not the story. Um, but a large part of it probably does have to do with the fact that it's military. And there's just so many. I'm in a heavily military populated area. There's like 4 bases for me to choose from within a 20-minute, you know, radius to go and like seek medical care.
yeah.
And we're like bogged down at all of them.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Mhm.
I just want to say this to my listeners that there is sometimes good reason and good good reason to go off meds, and I would just
Mhm.
recommend you do it supervised. But I also want to
Mhm.
caution, depending on what your struggle is, do not go off on your meds on your own.
No,
For
no, no.
example,
Yes.
I have bipolar. If you have bipolar or if you have
Yes.
schizophrenia, your
Don't do it.
meds are going to be your friend. So there's
Yes.
depending on what your struggle is, depending on your history, so so just talk with your doctor. Don't just stop taking your medication. I just want to throw that
Yes.
out there.
No, and that's a great qualifier because that is the thing. So I am like one of a select few that even has that option, right? I mean, I guess everybody has the free will to decide if you want to take it or not.
Yes.
But considering what I struggle with, generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder, I've never been diagnosed with depression. The panic disorder is what I'm at most risk. That's the one I'm most worried about.
Right.
Um, I probably will always be anxious and I can manage my anxiety, but the panic attacks they are a monster. Like just it totally, I mean, I told you I got to a point where I just couldn't even leave the house. Like it
Yeah.
disrupts my daily life so extremely that's the one thing that like, yes, don't go off of it on your own. A doctor needs to like have given you the information and know what you're struggling with and be speaking with you so that if symptoms do come back full full force that you're not taken aback by it
Yeah.
or you know in an unsafe position.
So I know that you are a woman of faith. How
Mm-hmm.
has navigating anxiety, medication, any of that in your faith community been like? Have you found support? Have you found more stigma? What has your
Mm-hmm.
experience been walking
Yeah,
through this as a Christian?
it's been kind of a mixed bag. um and two, I mean, I have experiences with like my church family locally and then my Christian brothers and sisters on the internet. That's a whole different experience.
Yes.
Because I have met people who are very outspoken about that medication is wrong, and that if you're a true Christian, you would not experience an anxiety disorder, that it's just a total lack of faith. Um, and even some people online that like I really respect say things like that. And I do have an issue with it. I have had people in the church locally support me regardless of what decision I made, medication or not. A lot of them mean well in encouraging me to pray through it, which I absolutely do. Like prayer is absolutely a part of my anxiety journey. I grew up in the church. So from the moment I started experiencing doubts and anxiety, my faith was always there and I was always taking it to God, and sometimes in tears, like just asking him to explain to me what's going on, take it from me, just I need to figure out what's going on. Um, it is hard because there is still a stigma that I see in the Christian community about people who have an anxiety disorder, or panic disorder, and that's funny too, because I don't know if they would say the same things about somebody struggling with different disorders. Like, are all disorders the same in the Christian community as far as like your faith is concerned? Can you pray schizophrenia away? Like, is that,
Yeah. Or
is
even
that kind of a
physical,
blanket
like,
belief?
would you tell the
Yeah.
diabetic not to take their insulin, just pray more?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no,
Why,
you
why
wouldn't
is
do it.
anxiety different? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have you ever had a crisis of faith going through this? Like, why God? And
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And not that long ago, I I think that my crisis started along with everybody else's crisis, right? 2020 was just a hard year
yeah.
overall in every regard. Um, some things were going on in my personal life, kind of preparing me for it anyway. COVID was not what kicked it off. Me being at home all the time was not. I was happy to be at home, away
Yeah.
from people. It was a vacation. That's not the reason why, but I absolutely, I was in therapy at the time. Um, I remember talking to my therapist and I'm like explaining what all the symptoms are. And she referred to it as an early midlife crisis. Like, I'm 34. So this was years ago, closer to 30, that I experienced like existential midlife crisis. And it
Mm.
was just a total questioning of, I'm very open. I might go into too much detail here, but I experienced a major crisis around my faith and what I believe and how I lived my life growing up in the church. I grew up in a very legalistic church, right? And so grew up in the age of purity culture. And it was like, okay, God, why did I make all of these decisions that I thought you told me to make? You told me to go to a Christian school and save myself till marriage and do X, Y, and Z. And for what? Like, here I am. I can barely leave my house. Like, I'm struggling with this disorder and I'm depressed all the time. Why did I even make these decisions? Like, that sums up the crisis for like the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, it was very hard. And I didn't talk about it. I did not post about that at all on social media. Um, it was a very serious crisis that I was not, my husband knew about it, but I was not prepared to like talk publicly about. Um, and it was hard because I was very like cynical towards the church, um, and just mad at God. Like, I think that's probably one of the only times that I've truly been mad at God was during that
Hmm.
time.
You know what? It's okay. God can take our anger. God
Yeah.
God can take it. I mean, there's a whole book in the Bible about lamenting, and
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah was kind of mad too, not just sorrowful. He was kind of mad.
Right.
How have you seen God show up these last few years? You had this crisis of faith. I know you
Mm-hmm.
still believe. how did you move through that anger and get
Mhm.
to a place now where you're like, okay, God, we're good.
Yeah, it was a long journey. I mean, therapy absolutely helped. I was seeing a Christian counselor. So she was very much helpful in reminding me of the things that I know to be true, but I was clouded, right, by all
Yeah.
these other things just chaotically in my mind. Um, at the time, I think part of what triggered the crisis was that I was not in the comfortable bubble that I had been used to living in, right? So prior to 2020, I had been working for our church for 6 years. So I was struggling with my panic attacks and everything while working for a church
Yeah.
and worked there for 6 years and then got a job with the police department right in the midst of COVID. So you want to talk about culture shock, working for 6 years in a church and then working for the police. Both are ministry fields, absolutely.
Yeah.
One is a lot harder to navigate. One, I am much more outnumbered and way less encouraged, right?
Yeah.
There's just so much like between the officers that are dealing with things that don't know how to process it to just all of a sudden the blinders are off. I'm seeing everything that our community is struggling with, and I know everything that's happening in the community. I That hit me like I was searching. I had to search for God for the first time in a long time. It's very easy to see him in the church, but it was very hard for me at that time to see him in my community because all I was hearing about was the bad and the negative, and that was not helping everything else. So it was really like a baptism by fire, just straight into the real world all at once with this crisis going on. Um, I will say that I'm not I'm not fully upset that it happened because I do feel stronger in a lot of ways. Um, I at one point was prepared to go into ministry and I was very well versed in like my Christianese and everything. And I do feel like I'm a bit more I'm a less uptight Christian now than I was before. And I feel like more of a real world Christian. Like I can relate to people out in the real world better now than I was ever able to when I was back in that bubble. So that's why I don't regret it. I'm able to see how to speak to people in the real world about this like spiritual battle that they're facing. Um, So that gives you some insight too into why things are so difficult for me at work with being off of my meds.
Yeah.
Um, because there just really is so much just evil and brokenness and sadness. But even despite all of that, like as I'm able to talk to coworkers and see them kind of putting the pieces together, I'm able to like formulate in my mind easier. This is why the Bible says what it says. Like these problems that we are seeing in the world, this is a result of doing the opposite of what the Bible says. Like I can see such direct correlations between the two that it just makes it make more sense to me than it did before. So I would consider that a God wink.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you encourage someone who is struggling with anxiety and struggling to see God in all of it?
Mm. I think sometimes it's hard for us to find God if we're struggling and we're not reaching out to others, if we don't have a community, because sometimes it is very hard for us to be the ones to point us back in the right direction. Um, so, the biggest piece of advice that I have is to talk about it. You don't have to broadcast it on the internet, that's not for everybody, but to find one or two people that you trust that are wise counsel in your circle. If you're a believer, that would be somebody, like a mentor, somebody that you look up to, um, that you could confide in them about what you're struggling with and know that they're a safe person that would be able to encourage you. I think that the devil does like to keep us isolated and will take advantage of that. And so I think one of the quickest ways to like smack down that attack is to just talk about it to somebody.
Get in community, get that support system. Absolutely. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much for sharing your story and your journey and
Yeah.
your encouragement. I know that there'll be a lot of women that resonate with you. And
Yeah.
is the best place for them to find you on Instagram?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I tried getting on Threads. I'm not on there very much, guys. So just let's
No.
stick with Instagram.
Okay, I will put Jessa's handle in the show notes. Thank you again so much for being
Yay.
here.
Thank you, Carla. It was great talking with you.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope we're already friends on social media, but if we're not, come find me on Instagram at Carla Arges or at Affirming Truth. Can't wait to see you back here next week. Bye, friends.